Excellent, thank you. All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Andrei Kaminski, and together with Willie, Ilse, and Shai, I'm co-organizer of this event. Our system is becoming more and more complex, and I'm not talking about complicated. I'm talking about complex, where we cannot easily deduct inputs into the system, from the inputs into the system, what outputs we are going to get. And those relationships between the subcomponents of those systems are too complex. And often we have to react quickly. So the only way to address this is by observing the behavior of the system and create an empirical model. Such a model cannot be static, must be dynamic. And we have to also automate responses to the system's behavior. The example of such a complexity comes from the technology shift. In the past, when we had our applications on premises, we could delay the upgrades. But now with the shift to the cloud, frequency of non-optional updates is increasing. For example, because we have to update underlying frameworks, but also because of the potential security vulnerabilities that cannot wait. They have to be addressed immediately. And here comes also the automation that is needed for detection, but also prevention. So if you think about definition of DevOps that consists of culture, automation, lean processes, measurement, or recovery, observability touches three of them, which is automation, measurement, and recovery. So today we're going to have two presentations that will talk about that. The first one will be about observability and making sense of those signals. And the second one will be of security and automation. So before we start the session, a few housekeeping items. First of all, the session is recorded. Please keep your mics muted during the presentations. After presentations, we'll have a period of 10 minutes for questions and answers. You can then unmute yourself and answer the question, but also you can type questions anytime during the presentations in the chat. So I would like to hand over to Willie to introduce the speakers.
Right, welcome everyone, and I'd like you to welcome William and Tom from Grafana Labs. They will be hosting the first session with the title Grafana+Prometheus and the demo of Loki and Tempo. And in this talk, they will give us a quick introduction to the Grafana Labs and their Big Tent philosophy, correlation demo between Prometheus, Loki, and Tempo, and a tracing demo. So we actually get a demo, exciting, to find bugs in an application without the developer. So without any further delay, I'll hand over to Tom.
Awesome. Thank you very much for the introduction and for having us here today. Like I was mentioned, my name is Tom Trieu. I'm here with William Wong. I am an enterprise account executive here at Grafana Labs. William, you want to say a quick hi and introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm William Wong, and I'm a solution engineer in Grafana Lab.
Perfect. This is the Vancouver Meetup group. I'm based in Surrey, so not quite Vancouver, but close enough in Richmond. And then William's just over in Richmond. So as we're going to talk about tonight, we're really excited to be here and for the opportunity to share a little bit more about Grafana Labs, our technology, and how we play in the observability space. As we kind of go through the session, feel free to drop questions into the chat. We're totally happy to take questions at the end, but if you have a burning question, if you really want to ask it during the presentation, feel free to interrupt us. That's no problem at all. We actually would invite interactions and engagement. So yeah, other than that, I'll go through the agenda, which we already kind of did, but the idea is that I would take us through an intro of Grafana Labs as a company, talk about a quick intro to kind of level set on our tech stack, talk a little bit about what our Big Tent philosophy is, what that's all about, why folks should care, why it's unique. And then I'll hand it over to William to get into the demo. Again, we'll do a correlation demo to show you how you can navigate metrics to logs to traces all under a single tab and under a single dashboard. We'll show you how you can find bugs in in your application without actually involving developers and using our stack for that. And lastly, as a little bonus, if we have time, we'll also show you how you can get started free using Grafana Cloud. Super easy, super cool. All right, without further ado, I'll get right down into it. So when most folks think about Grafana, this is typically what comes to mind. Grafana is a really pretty UI for dashboarding, and you can connect data to it, and it's really cool. This is, pretty accurate, but when you actually look at what Grafana offers in the stack, there's a lot more to it. So this is more of an accurate illustration of what you can expect from Grafana. So of course, Grafana, the visualization layer, still has that really rich and powerful dashboarding tool that everyone knows and loves. But we also have a very, very strong plugin ecosystem that through APIs, you can plug into hundreds. I think it's like over 250 different plugins and visualize that all under Grafana. And that's really where our big tent philosophy comes in and what sets us apart from other observability vendors. So the main thing here to take away when I'm talking big tent and what Grafana means from it is most organizations, they will have, let's say, Datadog for metrics, and then maybe they're using something like Splunk for logging and something like Honeycomb for tracing. If you were to troubleshoot an issue, you might start with your metrics in one application, then jump over to Splunk, and then jump over to traces and go back and forth in between, trying to memorize the timestamp, trying to memorize what happened. And it becomes very confusing, and it drags out the workload. With Grafana, what we allow folks to do is to plug in those 3 data sources or others, visualize it all on the same dashboard. So you can look at one screen and see, okay, here are my metrics coming from Datadog. Here are the same corresponding logs from Splunk, and here's a trace from Honeycomb. So you can jump through the 3 very, very easily. And that's what we mean when we talk about Big Tent. It's all about allowing our users and our customers to use the platform, the data source that is best for the job, and let us be that front-end visualization layer while applying advanced feature and functionality like alerting and reporting and other collaboration tools as well, so you can actually use this in an enterprise environment. So that's what most people know about Grafana, right? So the front end piece, and then even with just that front end visualization piece, we can expand it a lot further and bring that way down the line with Big Tent. The other area that Grafana Labs support with the rest of our stack is our backend. So when you're monitoring application or infrastructure, again, you might be using tools like Datadog, Splunk, Elastic, Sumo Logic, etc. But Grafana Labs also has our opinionated backend for this. We have a metric backend, a logging backend, a tracing backend. I'll get into a little more detail about those as well. So again, you can use our stack, which we think is a great stack, especially when you're monitoring Kubernetes, or you can use whatever tool you want and have Grafana be that single source of truth, that single pane of glass for you. One of my favorite things about Grafana before I move on here is that you can do this in many different ways. You can run this and deploy this open source yourself, or you can do this with us in a fully managed SaaS offering in the cloud. Or if you want to keep things private and in your own environment, you can do this self-managed with enterprise feature and support from us as well. So you have lots of flexibility in how you want to deploy and where you want to take it. I think one thing to note is, I'll go back here. One thing to know is that each of these little areas we can spend a full hour talking just about our plugin. We can spend a full hour talking about metrics. We can spend multiple hours talking about our metric logs and traces backend. So in this talk, we're really trying to give folks a high level, quick intro to these product lines, the concept, and try to give you really the one-liner of like what you should remember. And if there's questions, of course, feel free to ask us afterwards, or we can follow up, etc. So like I was saying, there's a lot to unpack here, and we're trying to keep things high level. I want to spend one more slide talking about the back end, because this is the area that folks aren't as familiar with Grafana Labs about. Again, I won't spend a ton of time here because, again, we want to get to the demo and get to the technical piece, but I think it's important to just kind of hit on a couple points here. So when it comes to Grafana metric, Grafana logs, Grafana traces, we have 3 separate backend support policies. Our metrics is powered by Prometheus and Mimir. The things to remember when you're talking about Grafana metric is if you're using Prometheus, and you're going for a high scale, high performance, and you want longer retention on your metrics, Grafana metrics is the perfect place to do this. We can do this for you. We scale to billions of metrics. And we can take care of all that work for you. When it comes to Grafana Logs, this is powered by Grafana Loki. And this is our Prometheus-inspired logging backend that is the perfect tool for debugging. It is hyper efficient, it is super cost effective, and it's super fast as well. And then for tracing, Grafana tracing, that is powered by Grafana Tempo. This is relatively newer to the market. I think we only GA'd it about 6 months to 12 months ago. So not super, I would say still pretty new is what I'm trying to say. But the big thing to recognize about Grafana Tempo, what makes it unique is that we allow, like, there is no sampling. You can ship everything through Tempo, and that's the intended use case. So you're not losing any information. You got everything with Tempo. And again, they're all super high performance, super highly scalable, etc. If I were to take, kind of building on that and zooming out a little bit more on the rest of the Grafana Labs stack, this is kind of what it looks like, right? So for this talk, we're really going to focus on Grafana visualization and this orange yellow section defined. But it's worth noting that we also have technology to the left. If you shift left, we acquired a company called K6 last year that does really, really cool stuff with load testing. We do some pretty cool stuff with the static monitoring. And if we got to go to the right of this, we have this fixed category with Grafana On-Call, which is released now. And then in beta, we have this thing called Grafana Incident to help you manage your incident response system. And of course, we have the really rich plugin system. So again, all to say is that when most people think of Grafana, they think of just this really simple UI for visualizing data. But when you look at you look at what else we provide, there's a whole lot of functionality here. And I would say if folks are looking to set up anything with observability, it's definitely worth taking a look at the full stack and seeing how this stuff can integrate. I'll shift gear and talk a little bit about the company behind all these technologies now. So Grafana Labs itself, we are about 800 employees. We have, more than 50% of our employees are in R&D, and we've been growing like crazy fast. I started Grafana March of last year, and I was employee 200, and now we're 800 plus. By the end of this year, we should be about 11 to 1,200 employees. So we're growing extremely quick. There are over 1 million active installation of Grafana. We have over 1,600 customers. We have over 8 million Grafana users, and we have raised just over $500 million in VC funding since 2019. So that's only 3 years ago. That's kind of like stats for the company itself. Where I would want to focus more attention on the right-hand side is where our expertise lies. And why I want to call this part out is Grafana Labs as a company back maybe 2017, 2018 time, we made a really strategic bet on Prometheus being going forward, it's going to be like the de facto way to monitor Kubernetes for metrics. We made that bet, and what we have done is, we invested a lot of time and energy building out that project, and at the same time, we have also a lot of Prometheus maintainers came and joined Grafana Labs because they saw our vision, they saw our investment in this area. So 44% of all Prometheus maintainers are now employed at Grafana Labs. And when I say we made a strategic bet into Prometheus, it's not just the Prometheus project. When we look at the Grafana Loki project, our logging backend, and our Grafana Tempo project, those are all Prometheus inspired. So if you're familiar with Prometheus and you're familiar with Prom2L, picking up Log2L and the tracing query language, it's going to be pretty similar. It's very easy to transition from one to another. And again, we have all the expertise in-house when you're looking at this kind of the stack. It's also worth mentioning, if there's graphite users out there, we are also the leading contributor to the graphite project as well. That's a little bit of a Grafana Labs of the company. Why folks should kind of care about this is, why talk about Grafana so much, talk about the tech stack is, again, the CNCF, they had a survey back in 2020, and they surveyed the users based on observability. If you look here, the graph kind of explains itself. When people had to vote where different technology were in terms of adopt, trial, and assess, you can see Prometheus is number one, and Grafana is right behind it. So we have picked up a ton of traction in the market, and again, we are really becoming the de facto standard for monitoring Kubernetes environments, especially. And I would also say if you are using Prometheus, but you're not using Grafana yet, I would 100% recommend you pick up Grafana. If you're using Grafana and you're not using Prometheus yet, I would 100% recommend you look at Prometheus. And if you're not using either, but you're looking to get into the world of observability, I would definitely recommend using both of these in your stack as well. Because again, the CNCF has recognized Prometheus and Grafana as the perfect combo. So you really can't go wrong with this tech stack. But that's kind of all I wanted to talk about in terms of the introductory to Grafana Labs and what we're all about. Again, if there's any questions, feel free to shout them out or throw them in the chat. Happy to answer them. If not, we'll pivot and I'll allow William to show off some actual technical demos. All right. I don't think there's any questions. William, over to you. Oh, William, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. Okay,
You're
so this is the fun part, a demo for Grafana. Now, first of all, this UI, of course, is Grafana. All these panels are created individually, and you can put together a dashboard like this rather easily. Now, what I'm showing here is a typical, web applications. I have multiple front end, and this screen here is showing the number of concurrent, web apps users. On the right-hand side, you can see all the alerts. Scroll down a little bit, you can see all the error codes, HTTP error code, all the incoming logs on your HTTP servers, error rates in your applications, message queues. So you can put together something like this to meet your observability objective. Now, one thing here that's interesting is this particular panel here is showing there are 3 different web apps right now. It's the number of users, web app 1 and web app 2, they're pretty consistent, right? But somehow web app 3, the number of users go up and then it came back down and then go up and down again. So there is something not quite right. So what we can use here is I can actually show you how you can actually find out where the problem is, starting from like right here. So we have an option which you can actually explore the details of this particular panel. So Explorer now is showing, earlier, Tom actually mentioned PromQL, the query language that we use. It's basically a really simple way that you can actually extract data out from your environment. In this particular case, we are looking at a service equal to web app _star, and then the Kubernetes environment is in productions. And from here, how can you actually look at all the other data, right? So one thing you can actually do is you can split the screen. Now, before I split the screen, because look at this graph, I'm interested in only the third web app here. I can just either filter it like this, change it to web app 3, and now it's showing only web app 3 data. And I can split the screen and say, okay, now besides all the metric information, all the numbers, I want to look at the logs. But where are my logs? There are many data store that you can have. You can have your data in AppDynamics, Azure, or CloudWatch, or Datadog, or even Splunk. Let's just start with Splunk. So let's just say, assume, I have data in Splunk. I can just click on it. And as soon as I click on it, and one thing that you might actually notice is this part here is actually the Splunk query language. We actually automatically translate whatever you have on the metric side to the Splunk side. So this is one new capability we call it glue. Right now, we can translate from Prometheus to Splunk easily. In the future, you can do the other way around. You can do Splunk and then Prometheus, etc. So scroll down here, you can actually see the corresponding logs from the same time frame. Now, one thing you can do is actually you can synchronize the time frame for these 2 windows. You just need to click on this chain icon, and then the time frame will be synchronized. And then you can zoom into a particular, for example, a particular section of the code of the data. And then on the right-hand side, it will filter out the corresponding logs as well. Now, in this particular demo, my primary data source for logging is actually not Splunk. So I'm actually going to close this. I will open it up again, and I will select the Loki data source, which is our backend data source for logging. So again, one thing that we do really well is ability to copy or translate the query from one data source to another data source. And as you can tell, right now, I'm only looking at the Web App 3 logs. And here you can see all the corresponding logs, and immediately there is something red going on. It's saying something out of memory error. And this is the stuff that we are interested in. I can actually filter out all these logs and say, I just want to look at the error level, which is equal to error. So click on this, filter, and then it will filter out, notice up here, previously it was just the Web App 3, but now it adds the label error level equal to error. And then you can see I only have the errors that is related to in this particular time frame. Now, here is saying out of memory error. So it looks like somehow around this time frame, this particular applications was out of memory. It was restarted. That's why the number of users go up and then go back down. If you want to look into the program itself, let's just say I want to find out more about why there is such an error. You can actually click one of these what we call trace connections. You can actually look into the trace for that particular transactions. So like this, let me just maybe close the left-hand side, and I will just open it up again here. And I'll click one of these, and you will be able to see the corresponding trace. Now, there are lots of information here, and it's not easy to understand, right? So what am I looking at here? There is an easier way. We call that a node graph. Just click on this node graph, and you will have a visual representation of your entire program span. Let me just close this, make this a little bit bigger. So you can see this one is a demo program. So it's kind of bad that it's calling everybody, but in the next demo, I will show you that one. I'll show you one that makes more sense, okay? So there is a visual way that you can see where the bottleneck is in your program. Okay, so that's for demo one. Now let's go to demo.
Before we shift gear, it's worth calling out that William, he just went from metrics to logs to traces, and he spent a lot of time explaining the different steps and how to do certain things. But that workflow, William, if you were actually trying to troubleshoot an issue, that probably would take you how long? Maybe like 2-3 minutes to kind of find the root cause of the issue?
Yeah, so this particular demo doesn't show you the root cause yet. The next demo will actually show you the root cause of your program. So it's actually much easier by just going through all these panels, just click, and then you find your answer, which is the power of Grafana and different data backends. We always call this single plane of glass, ability to pivot between data source and make your life easier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome.
Okay, so let me just go back to my home screen here. So I'm going to show you the next demo. Okay, so this demo is a bit more interesting in a way that the focus here is from the trace. Let's just say, your program, you have instrumented your program with something like observability, open telemetry, or Jaeger or Siebkind. And we have ability to generate all these metrics internally in the in our data store. So something like request rate, errors, these are automatically generated in the backend. So you don't need to do anything. All you need to do is just copy one of these dashboard over, and then immediately you have a lot of the information about your application. Now, in this particular example here, let me just slow down a little bit. You can see the request rate, and you can see there are a bunch of errors in your program. It's not a lot. It's overall is less than 1%, but it's coming from all the different endpoints or different targets. Account, card, fast cash, payment. Well, there is nothing in payment yet. Login, health. Scroll down a little bit more. You can see we also have the auto-logged errors. These errors are automatically generated in the backend from your trace. And one thing you can actually do is, again, open it up, and you can see, okay, there is an error. I want to understand more about this error. Typically in the past, you pass that back to your developer, right? But now you don't actually need to, because you have the trace information. So click on this trace ID, and I will have the corresponding trace information in my program. Now, this is a pretty graph, but to a lot of people, it doesn't mean much, right? Especially if you are not a developer. Now, again, we do have the node graph. So this one makes a little bit more sense. You can see the program requester is calling the endpoint. Endpoint is doing a database insert. And underneath is doing a HTTP post. And then there is a DNS lookup here. And you can see majority of the time is spent in this TCP connect. And it's something that's easier. It's quite easy to read. Now, having said that, this is just nice, but where is my problem, right? So you can see there are some exclamation marks here, red things, and you can also see the corresponding logs. So just click on the logs, and it will bring up these automatic generated logs, and you can see one of them, this red one, is actually saying error null value in column name of relation fast cache violates non-null constraint. It looks like a database problem, right? But again, like, what does that mean? Like, what is the corresponding database, query? Now, one thing you can actually do is the information is actually in your trace. So we actually store that in the backend as well. So click on this. You can see in the tags, it's actually showing you the actual DB statement. So it looks like somebody was inserting into this fast cache column, and one of the value is actually null. And that's where your problem is. Now, from end to end, it took me like maybe, I don't know, a few minutes. I was able to find out the root cause of all these errors. And it's just by a few clicks. Now, having said that, well, we find one. How about all the others, right? So one thing you can do, again, go back to here. I want to filter out only the errors. Add that label. And I want to close the left-hand side here. And now this is showing one error in my program. And I can actually use the time frame here to zoom out and then find all the rest of the errors. So you can see more errors, and scroll down here, and you will be able to see all the errors are very similar, and they are just for different endpoints. This one is for accounts, that one is for payment, but they are all saying null value in column named. So by just a simple time zoom out and filtering in terms of the errors, I was able to like get all the errors show up on one screen. And Once you have this, you can easily pass this back to your developer and have them fix the problem, and you will be able to have a good program. All right, so that's the second demo. Any question in the chat window?
You got one, William. I think if we can comment on where do we store logs and traces? How efficient is it? What are there retention policies?
Yeah.
Yeah, you got it. Okay, cool.
Okay, I got it. Yeah, so in this particular demo, we store all the logs in our Loki backend and the traces in our Tempo backend. Both Loki and Tempo are highly efficient environment. Compared to Elasticsearch or Splunk, we are 80% less resources, which is really, really efficient. And in terms of performance, you saw how I did it. Everything is just fast. So it's comparable performance and highly efficient. Plus, it's also open source, so you can use all these for free if you want to, set it up by yourself. Okay.
The last one on retention, default retention is 30 days. Is that right, William? But that's adjustable?
That's for our cloud. If you want to deploy it on prem, you can change it to whatever you want. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, so we finished the two demos. Now we want to give you something free. Besides the software is free, we also want to give you a way to start your journey with Grafana easily. So you can actually go to our website, grafana.com. I think the URL here, I forgot the exact URL here. We actually have a free forever plan. So all you need to do is to create a free account, and then you will have 10K metric series, 50 gig logs, and 50 gig of traces for free forever. And you don't need a credit card. So all you need to do is click create free, and you can use your Google single sign-on, GitHub, Microsoft, Amazon. I use my Google, and this is my free account. Once you are in here, all you need to do next is to click launch Grafana. These backends, like what we mentioned earlier, they will provide you as free. Click on this, and then you get the Grafana UI. It's still showing up. Now, okay, well, I have a UI. How can I connect data? How I can do visualization, right? We actually made it like really, really simple, for people to begin. All you need to do is click on connect data. And here we have a bunch of what we call integrations. These are pre-built dashboard, pre-built alertings, and all you need to do is connect your data source, and then you will be able to visualize your data immediately. So one that I want to show you is I'm using a Mac. Let's just say I want to monitor, my laptop. How can I do that, right? All you need to do is click on these integrations, and then install integration. Now, depending on your machine type, I actually have a ARM64 machine, the new M1 Mac. And once you select that, all you need to do next is execute all these commands in your terminal, and then start the agent. And that's it. Once it's done, test and finish the installations. Okay, it's all done. And we have a preview dashboard. All you need to do is click on this, and you get the list of dashboard. And this is the one that I want. Ta-da! And you have all your data. And it is that simple. So starting with the Grafana Cloud is free, and you can use it as much as you want. Okay. Now, the other thing, well, this is a really simple like Mac OS setup, right? We also have a similar one for Kubernetes. It's a bit more complicated, but again, it's just a few commands. Install the integration. Okay. You need a bit of prerequisites. Once you've done, you can, again, execute these few commands. And as soon as you finish that, then again, you will be able to start monitoring your Kubernetes environment with Grafana. Okay, so that's all I have.
Awesome. Yeah, we're happy to take any questions or comments or there's one.
Yep, there is one question from Mark, and the answer is yes. We use TSL to ship data from the agent to Grafana backend. Yeah, Mark. It depends on your question is about whether there is any data cache locally. The short answer is it depends on the data source. Meaning, for example, let's just say you need to connect to Splunk, and we do actually have a way that you can configure the cache. So if there is a disconnectivity between Grafana and Splunk, you can still see some data. Yeah, it will cache locally for those. Yeah, but it depends on the data cache type. Yeah, data source type. Sorry. It's you have another question. Is the local cached data encrypted? I believe the cache is actually in memory. Again, it depends on the plugins or the data source itself. So I believe most of them are encrypted. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions?
I can take HIPAA. Yes, we do have HIPAA compliance. Yes, we do. And then are we aware of any successful implementation on a hybrid environment, AWS and remote data centers?
Yeah, we have many customers doing hybrid environment. Yeah.
What API functionality is available? Can we query Grafana externally from another solution?
If you are talking about the data source, because our backend, for example, the metric backend is Prometheus compliant, so you can use Prometheus to do the query.
It's usually the other way around, though.
Yeah.
Usually, you would use Grafana to query out to whatever data source you're connecting to. So, a common use case is, again, you big organization, you have like 6 or 7 different observability tools. Instead of having developers log into each individual tool, you can just log into Grafana and use whatever query language New Relic has or Datadog has, and do that right inside Grafana itself to just eliminate one more step that they would have to take. So usually the other way around for querying.
Yeah, it's usually the other way around. Yes, thank you, Tom.
Yeah, of course. Can we import logs as file? Import logs or export logs?
Yeah, there are many messages right now. Hold on.
I think when we ask for like importing logs, usually that comes up when folks are looking to migrate onto, like, say, our cloud solution, and they don't want to lose their the logs that they have in their existing solution. Is there a way to do that? I believe so, right, William? You can import, but not a file. I'm gonna let William take this one. I'm gonna stop talking and let William take this one.
Import logs as files. I think what you mean is you have a bunch of files and you want to import those logs into our backend. Is that correct? Okay. Yeah, you can definitely do that. Yes. The only issue is there is a time spent, a time dependency on your log. Like if your data is really old, we won't be able to import that. Yeah.
We have a question about success stories. Actually, William, if you give me a quick sec, I can share my screen because this might be.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when it comes to success story, obviously we have a ton of them on our website itself, but one thing I was going to key up anyways is next week or the week after, whenever June 13th is, I think it's 2 weeks from now, actually, we have Grafana Cloud online, which is our biggest annual event where we'll have customers, open source users, Grafana developers talking about, diving into our entire stack. There's like 30+ sessions over these 3 days. It's completely free. It's all virtual. If you sign up, you get the free recording. So yes, we have a ton of publicly success stories. This is one of probably a very good place to start, and it's very relevant because this will all be like super recent. There's actually a talk on, I'm gonna say the Wednesday towards the end of the day, from a company called Medallia. They have a massive open source environment using Prometheus with panels, Grafana Loki for logging, and Jaeger for further tracing, and Grafana to visualize it all. So if you're looking for like a really good success story, they are, an excellent open source user, and I would highly recommend checking out that session. Okay, we have a couple more questions, William. Are you?
Yep. The next one is, do you have any statistics on average amount or limits of logs and traces sent by a cloud workload? Now, it depends on what you want to do in terms of the workload in the cloud. One really cool thing about Grafana is we don't actually need the data to send from your machine to the Grafana instance, meaning, let me, Tom, can you stop share? Let me share my screen again. I actually have a Azure resources dashboard. Now, this dashboard, we don't actually need the information from your Azure to send to the Grafana backend. We actually have plugins that can actually connect to all these different data sources, meaning your cloud provider database or repository, and we are able to get those informations and display on your screen. So you don't even need to store data in our backend in order to visualize your cloud resources. Okay, so the next question is data within Grafana normalized, or is the data stored in raw format? Either way, can it be exported? Now, Grafana, we actually, in terms of the data store, we don't store the data in a raw format. We actually store it in a format that I forgot, but it's not a raw format. And the way that we make it efficient is we don't index everything in your raw data. We actually index the timestamp and also labels in your log lines. A label, for example, like host name is a label, and the rest of the string, we don't index it. And that's why, or that's how we actually made it so efficient. And then that comes to the next question. What would be the differences with Kibana and Elastic in terms of pros, cons, and differences? What I can say is resources requirement is a lot less with the Grafana solution. Like what I mentioned earlier, it's 80% or 90% less. And the whole reason for that is because we don't do indexing at the very beginning. We actually use runtime, searching capability, and we actually optimize how we search the data, and that's why we make it less heavyweight. Okay, okay, so next question. Can any of your product help build an end-to-end app map between different infrastructure points? Oh, if you are talking about a traditional monitoring where you have your router, whether you have your servers, and you want to show a map on how all these components connect together, we actually don't do that. The closest relations to this is how we do tracing. When I showed you the map, how all the components call each other, how long it takes, that's the one that we do, yeah. Okay, where can Grafana Cloud be located, i.e. only Canada or only US requirements? Tom, do you have the answer for that question?
I know that we don't have a cloud in Canada yet. It's something that we are actively working on. Again, William and I are both based in Vancouver, so we're very much pushing for this.
Yes.
It's coming right now. It's across the US, a couple of regions in the EU, and a few more in APAC. Yeah, so no Canada just yet, but it's coming.
Okay, next question is about data sharding. The way we do this, we definitely do data sharding. How can we actually control by the customer? That I won't be able to answer it. I can get back to you on that one. Yeah. Okay, any other questions? Okay, if not, then I will stop my share. And
I'll close off with one last thing. So again, if folks are interested in learning more about Grafana or any of our tech stack, GrafanaCon is free, it's virtual, it's a great way to check it out. I would also, as a kind of a thank you for taking the time, especially on a sunny day after a lot of rain. Yeah, little special kind of gift. The first 20 people that sends me an email just saying, hey, I was at the Vancouver Meetup group, we'll get a free t-shirt. So if you want a free Grafana t-shirt, feel free to send me an email, just say that you were here, and then we will sort you out. Oh, another question coming in, and I think we may be running to the end of our scheduled time. So maybe this might be one of the last questions.
Yeah, Peter asked a question about what sort of queries cause issues of slow response or have performance impacts. I think the biggest issue is not the query itself, but how your data is labeled. So meaning when you ship your data, there is this label that you can apply to your information, whether it's a metric, whether it's a log. You just have to be a bit careful in terms of the label itself, meaning you should not create a lot of cardinality on these labels. I'll give you one example. Your label name is host name, and then underneath host name, you have all the corresponding, server name, right? That's a good practice. The bad practice is you use the server name as a label. So you will have tons of labels, and that will actually cause a really bad performance in your environment. So that's something that you should avoid. Oh.
One more question just came in here. Andre, Willie, should we do a time check? Are we good to go for a little longer, or are we eating into the Kevin's time?
It's fine. We can have another 5 minutes or so.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Perfect. Okay. Awesome. So right, keep the question coming then.
Yeah. The last question is about what are any dev implementation requirements for the end-to-end traceability as per demo? You can do open telemetry. You can do Jaeger or Zipkin. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good question. OTel is definitely the most popular one that's been coming out recently. It seems like everyone is either implementing it or looking to, or yeah, there's a lot of traction behind OTel right now.
There's more questions. Excellent.
Yeah, the query translation. I think we do have some information on that, but we don't have a table that say, from which language to which language is supported right now. But for your information, from Prometheus to Splunk to Elasticsearch, those are supported right now. I think it's the other way around that we're implementing at the moment. So for example, from Splunk back to Prometheus, and those are the stuff that we're working on. Yeah.
It's a Grafana for Dummies. GrafanaCon, I don't mean to keep on plugging this, but the GrafanaCon, the very first session on the 13th is a keynote where our co-founder, our CEO, and I don't know, this is bad, it's recorded. And I believe our CTO are going to give an overview of Grafana, kind of big announcement of what we've done recently. So that might be kind of a really quick 30-minute way to get a deeper crash course on a high level. That would be great for managers. And then, yeah, perfect, Mark, thank you. That's another great place to look. And I'd also like a quick plug for our blogs. Our blogs are actually really, really good, and they're written by our solution engineers and our developers. So it's a great place to learn more about our technology. So I'll also plug our blogs.
And Tom, could I ask you to put your email address maybe in the chat so people can easily copy?
Yeah, of course.
With the t-shirts. Thank you.
Right.
All right, if you've got no more questions, thank you very much. Willie, over to you.
Great, thanks very much, Tom and William. This was a really great session. For our second talk, titled Back to the Future with Security Automation. Let me take this over here, unhide Kevin. So let me start that again. So for our second talk, titled Back to the Future with Security Automation, I'm pleased to introduce Kevin, a phenomenal cybersecurity engineer, a fan of PowerShell, Azure DevOps, vibrant collaboration, Lego, and coffee. So Kevin, please take us back to the future. All yours.
Thanks, Willie. Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Tom and William. That was very interesting. I had used some similar tools before, but that was really cool. I'm going to email you after this. Hopefully I'm one of the 20. Let me just share my screen here and get this started. All right. All right. So first of all, this logo is completely open on Google. I didn't infringe any copyrights, just to be absolutely clear here. So there's a number of things I want to share with you all today. Mainly things that I have been both working on for some time and envisioning as the future in the work that I do. But first, I will introduce myself and say hello. So I'm Kevin. I have done a number of online, actually quite a few now, probably about a dozen different online talks over the course of the pandemic. It's very different than in person. So what I will kindly ask everyone, so please ask any questions you want, anything at all about me, about my work, everything I say, put in the chat and I will look at the chat at the end. I don't monitor chat in Zoom as I go because it is just too many things at once to keep an eye on with a shared screen set up. My pronouns are he, him, and I come to you as a settler on the stolen land of the Coatue First Nation, now known as New Westminster. I feel these things are important to start to normalize in, especially in the tech sector, various talks and conferences I'm in. So I wanted to share that with you all. I've worked in IT for actually over 10 years now. I've worked in security for 8 of those years, and I've been at WorkSafe for a little over 4 years. It was a big shift for me from my previous roles entering the public sector from the private sector. So before, I'd done everything from network and systems engineering to systems architecture for a space and defense company. So that was quite different than what I do now. And I've done pretty much every area of security under the sun over the years before I found what I personally find the most interesting and right up my alley, which is web app and cloud application security and everything to do with the cloud. As mentioned by our host, Willie, I am obsessed with collaboration. I have talked my coworkers' ears off about consistency, standardization, and I truly believe in the human factor of security and about IT. Historically, people consider the human factor of security as a weakness. I view it as a strength. I believe in inclusiveness and respect and open lines of communication and working with people as people as much as possible, to not treat people like machines. You can find me on our favorite website, Twitter. I don't usually talk about security there, but as my coworkers know, I'm a very outspoken individual. So feel free to message me there, and yeah. So I started in DevSecOps at WorkSafe BC. Now, I did not know what this was before starting at WorkSafe BC. This was a new concept for me, and it's a relatively new concept in general. But everything about DevSecOps really was up my alley and what mattered to me. So on a surface level, this is what it's about. No, I Googled DevSecOps, and this was the coolest image that could possibly have come up for DevSecOps. I don't know what it has to do with DevSecOps, but I really want to share this image. What DevSecOps actually is, it's the application of security to the DevOps process for the whole thing. Now, historically, I'm sure you've all heard of the waterfall model, and we've always looked at software from start to finish. You start at one side, you go to the other side, you design, you build, you test, you release, etc. DevOps makes this a continuous process. It's ongoing, it's iterative, it's agile, etc. You all know this. But the application of security to all parts of this is where I found my interest and passion lay. Now we're talking everything from the initial design of an application all the way through to the initial POC and coding and testing and deployment, operation and monitoring. And then when we go back to those applications and we continue to work on them and iterate on them. And this is obviously very large. So the application of security, different parts of this matters, and it's implemented in different ways. A few things are just, this is more of a background of DevSecOps as to why I'm doing this. One of the most important things in DevSecOps is that we're trying to stop saying no. Security has always been the militant enforcer, the people that prevent you from doing things, etc. But we're changing this. We are trying to lean into new technologies, new trends, new changes, new processes, new people, new ways of doing things, rather than immediately saying no. And along these things is that we are trying to understanding the data, understanding the business, understanding how to apply security to these whole processes. And we're trying to not approach things from a place of uncertainty, doubt, fear over new technologies and what they could possibly do for us along those lines. Again, this one I think is my most important one in this whole manifesto, is that I believe in open contribution and collaboration. This is about working with developers, working with the business, and understanding what the requirements are from all parties rather than imposing the security ones. Of course, everyone likes APIs these days, but the most important thing is that historically security has been about, we will mandate these controls. This is a list, this is what you have to do. These are the requirements, no arguments there. But most importantly, now we are focusing on offering a service, offering systems, tools, application services that all users, whether it's business or development, can use and consume in their own applications. We are moving away from the audit checklist, going through the controls, checkboxes, and actually looking at what's applicable to an application and an enterprise. Historically, there was the concept of pen testing, penetration testing, that happens over the course of a few weeks when big applications coming out. You give a report, you fix a report, and you're done. Very, very commonly, and this is still very common, is that a security person assessing an application or system will do a scan. They say, oh, you got this issue, fix these things, but those are not really practical all the time. They might not be even applicable. They're very automated. We'll get to more of that later. So we're focusing on more of a targeted approach, playing red team and blue team, attackers and defense, actually focusing on what's important and applicable. This is a huge one, and this is actually one huge area of my work focus right now, is looking at monitoring, alerting, and having more of a proactive approach rather than a reactive approach. Very, very commonly, still now, over the course of all time, we get alerts when there's an issue, we detect a SQL injection, things like that, and we will look at that alert and we will see what happened. But the whole goal now is that we're trying to be proactive, catching things ahead of time, focus on a preventative approach rather than coming after the fact. And this is a huge one in line with collaboration. We want to share things with all of you, with the devs, with business, with management, with everyone. We want to be open and share these things. That's why I'm here tonight, because I want to share and collaborate with what's going on. Again, historically, and how I initially learned security was, we can't trust people, have to keep information to ourselves. And while there's nothing wrong with a little healthy paranoia, working as security in this world we are in, with this wild, crazy world, there's much more benefit to sharing and openness and working as a group rather than working against other people. And my favorite thing is going through an audit checklist. No, we're not doing that anymore. This is another huge focus of mine right now, is that you focus on continuous applicable compliance, and you try and make everything you do proactive and applicable to your business, your organization, your applications, rather than going through anything arbitrary. All right, that was a good list. So what's the problem? What's going on? Why am I here talking about automation, and how do we meet these goals that we just went through previously? Well, we can't, and I'll tell you why we can't, and I'll tell you what we can do to try and solve it. First of all, we're never going to have enough staff. We're never going to have enough resources. We're never going to have enough of anything. By 2025 in Canada and the US, there's going to be a cybersecurity job shortage of 3.5 million people, 3.5 million job openings. If any of you are interested in security, now's a really good time to enter the industry. But we are always going to be short-staffed. We're always going to be under-resourced, and we're always going to struggle with that. So what do we do about that? Well, assuming we can't hire more people, we're trying to modernize our approach. We're trying to become more efficient. We're trying to become more lean, and we're trying to automate where we can automate, because it's always faster than manual work. Now, historically and currently in security, there's been a very static set of security strategies over the course of a long period of time, definitely over my whole career. And they overpower everything. They push through attempts at modernization. It's very, very difficult to change mindsets. And this is the human factor I had mentioned before. You can't change people's mind easily. And it requires a little bit at a time. It requires openness, sharing, education, training, and practical application of what you want to change. It's very hard to do this because at the same time, you're having to keep up with modernization across the whole industry that is incredibly, incredibly fast. I'm sure all of us working in this industry, we see change at an incredibly fast pace. Could be new business processes, could be new, it's a lot of cases, it's new technologies. Going back 5 years, the industry and the tech world looks massively different. And when it comes to security, every month there's a new type of threat, a new zero-day vulnerability, a new major breach. It never stops. And everything is changing and modernizing. It's very hard to keep up in combination with everything else. You're being held back by old-fashioned archaic strategies and approaches, and the constant issue of not having enough staff or people. And as a result of all this, it's very easy to lean into what you know. You fall back into what you know, you fall back into habits and patterns because it's easier, it's faster in the face of all the things you're trying to watch and keep up with and deal with at the same time. It's just very easy to do. And this is a natural human response. It's something that needs to always be kept in mind when you're looking at any part of technology, is the human inclination, how we're going to respond to it as human beings, because we're all people and there's always an emotional, mental aspect into everything we do. So what's the end result of all of these things? Well, traffic jams. You just stop. You try and go every which way and you get absolutely stuck. And as a result, nothing gets done because you're stuck. You're trying to put out fires, deal with daily day-to-day operations, and never move forward on any task or project. And how do you solve this? Well, I'm proposing you solve this with automation. And this is the coolest automation image I could find. I have a great time finding images for these talks because there's just so many interesting things out there. So the solution: you can't keep up while doing everything yourself. It's not possible. There's too much. And everyone's going to always be short-staffed. You're always going to be under-resourced. So how do you keep up while doing things yourself? You can't. So you need to automate things. Now, it's important to understand that you can't automate everything, and you can only do some things, and a computer is only actually good at very few things. We fall into a trap in this industry where we try and think that computers can do a lot more than they can, but their usefulness is very small, has a very narrow angle. Words are failing me right now, but there's only some things you can do on a computer. Now, some of these are very straightforward and obvious. If you do something more than once in the same way, automate it. And that actually applies to more situations than we think. Say, for example, and I actually ran into this the other day, I was trying to query the status of a work item in Azure DevOps, and I was trying to pull a report every day. I wanted to find out in the morning every day how many of a certain work item type had closed the previous day, trying to keep kind of a metric of how many of our teams pace through this certain type of work item. Well, after a couple days of pulling this up in the morning before our morning stand-up, I realized, wait a second, I'm doing the same thing every morning with the same information. Let's automate it. And I did. So now I automatically get this report every morning. So it's things like that, that a lot of cases that we have in the workplace now, and a lot of aspects of our job, we do the same thing more than once in the same way. That's extremely common. So let's automate these things. And now, in kind of the other side of the coin of that, it's important to recognize that you cannot automate everything. And there's a lot of things you cannot automate, and there's things that must remain manual. We fall into a trap as well in security where we try and automate scans, automate alerts, a whole bunch of things. Well, you can't automate everything. And if you try, you're either going to get a lower quality result, or you're actually going to cause yourself more work. The key thing to look at is only implement automation if you're actually going to get a tangible benefit and result out of it. Whether you speed something up, you make something easier, you can leverage multiple systems for a task that would be much more cumbersome to do manually. You always want to look for some kind of benefit. And it's important to recognize too that you can't boil the ocean. You can't solve every problem all at once. You can't implement automation. Oh, I'm just going to do automation and everything's fine. No, you can't do that. You can't do that. You have to do one thing at a time. And one of my favorite phrases and quotes in security is, don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Don't try and do everything all at once in a perfect way, because you can't. And you're going to stop yourself from making small, concrete progress as a result. So don't boil the ocean all at once. Don't aim for automating your whole job, automating someone else's job, automating everything. Do small little bits at once. I started my automation journey by writing a single script back in the day that did a server reboot for me. I could give it a list of servers and it would do a reboot of those servers anytime I ran it. Just a small little thing, very basic. I think it was 3 lines of PowerShell in the end. But in the end, over the course of a month, I think it saved me something like 12 hours of time, which sounds wild, but I mean, I'm sure some of you know how long it takes to log into a Windows server via remote desktop and reboot it. So maybe 12 hours is understandable. So yes, take off small bite-sized chunks, do a little bit at a time, and eventually those will all build on each other like Lego blocks, and you will get somewhere. One of the most important things to remember too is that you want to prioritize your processes and your workflows and how you do work rather than what you do. And in the case of any security related task, it's not so much what scripts you run, what scans you run, what steps you take, but the order you do them in. Is that step even necessary? Can we skip it with other types of logic? What else can you do here? It's important to examine the overall process and how you do something rather than what you do. And again, as I mentioned, start with the basics. Start with a script to reboot servers. Start with a script to do a work item query and give you an HTML report in the morning. Start with the basics. Don't boil the ocean all at once. Do a little bit at a time, 3 lines of PowerShell at a time, or Python, or whatever your preference may be. I'm a huge PowerShell fan. Anyways. So as mentioned before, there's a really big part of automation in general, but specifically security automation for things you automate and things you don't automate. And what I found going through these over the years is that most things you don't automate. However, those things you do automate, they have encompassed a bulk of my time. So the ratio of time to effort was quite beneficial to me. So as mentioned before, anything that you have to repeat, automate that. Anything you do more than once in the same way every time you do it, do a script. Even if it saves you 30 seconds each time, that will add up. It's all about small changes that add up over time. Anything very simple as well. As mentioned, having to reboot a server, that's a very easy. That does not require an advanced degree to reboot a Windows server. It's even all in a GUI. I don't even have to use a terminal for Windows. It's great. Start, shut down. But anything that's a simple task, try automating it. You have to do a query every morning for a work item. That's very simple, but automate that. It's all about starting very small. And again, going back to what I mentioned at the start, but the era of APIs, anything that has an API, do a script, do some kind of command to automate this, and you will save your time eventually. Because anything with an API by its very nature is programmatically interactable interface, which is what all of these automation coding languages and engines are built to interact with. And any kind of administrative task, any way you can automate these or make these more efficient, again, whether it's by examining the process and how you do them or otherwise. To give you an example of this one, every time at my organization that a software release occurs, there is a pipeline, a CD pipeline that deploys a built artifact to a cloud resource, whatever that might be, virtual machine, app service, container, it could be anything. And at some point in this pipeline, it requires a security review. And every time the security review occurs, we would get an email alert from Azure DevOps saying this pipeline is ready for review. We would grab the name of the pipeline, look at the URL, create a work item, paste in the name of the pipeline into the work item, hit save, create some tasks. Like I think our basic review, there were 5 different tasks, like do a code review, check this tool, analyze third-party dependencies, things like that. So I'm trying to remember the actual time that took to spin up, but it was a few minutes for every single time an Azure DevOps notification arrives saying a pipeline is ready for review. It would take a few minutes to create the work item. And I automated this. It's an administrative task. I created a script that ran automatically every time that security review point was hit in the pipeline. that grabbed the information for the pipeline and created that work item for us. It took a while to create that script, but now every single engineer is saving a few minutes for every single review that comes in, and that adds up. So there's an example, things like that. Now, things you shouldn't automate. Penetration testing is a huge one in security because this is a huge market for security products. And I'm not going to get into a rant about modern security products and appliances in this talk, but there's a lot of them, and they are very well marketed, and they mostly have very limited effectiveness, especially on a modern web app. Simply put, a modern web app is not what these tools were built for. It works in a very different way. The vast majority of these tools, in fact, every tool that I've personally tried and used, which is quite a few over the years, is pretty much built for the era when you had a LAMP stack, Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP, or Perl, I think the PL stood stand for sometime, like that kind of thing. It was built for a very specific web app era with very different technologies and a modern Angular, React, Vue.js, even a modern .NET Blazor, MVC application, all these modern apps with a modern authentication scheme, SAML, OpenID Connect, things like that. It works so differently than anything these tools were ever designed for. So how you do pen testing as a security engineer has changed completely. It's using attack proxy tools like Burp Suite or Zap and items like this to actually do manual, focused, and targeted tests on parts of an application that you can use and interact with. And going in line with this one, anything to do with the business logic of an application, when you're analyzing that, testing that, this is not something that you can have a tool do for you. It requires a human being. It requires a human brain, human logic and intuition, as well as the ability to use more manual tools to intentionally and manually inject data, modify headers, change tokens, fire scripts in. There's a whole bunch of things here that they need a human being. A validation activity is a very important part of a security review. It's ensuring that that's an output from a tool or a scan, any kind of result is correct. You have to validate if that result is accurate. If it's a false positive, is it a false negative? So you have to basically use the abilities and knowledge of a security person to ensure that the results and data that you get from your tools and from your automation is correct, is valid. You can't just assume something is correct because you see it out of a tool or out of a report. And most importantly, any kind of highly regulated industry, as personally I came from the space and the defense sector, which is extremely regulated. Working now for WorkSafe BC, there are a number of federal and provincial government information privacy acts, healthcare privacy, everything like that. We don't have HIPAA up here. It all falls under the FOIPA and FIPA, these different types of privacy acts on different levels. But anything to do with an actual regulation that your industry, your organization has to abide by, don't automate those, because those are very important and too important to leave in the hands of a computer. So how to wrap all these things together and all these ideas behind automation and how to improve the workflow. I wanted to introduce you all just to this idea that I've been working on and percolating for quite some time. So, oh, there we go. I'm sure most of you have seen something like this before. This is the Nexus lane at a border crossing. So in case no one knows, I'm going to quickly explain what Nexus is. It's a pre-clearance program that applies to boats, planes, and automobiles, and it allows you to skip the line basically. Now, essentially what happens when you apply for a Nexus card, you go through an application process, a very extensive and time-consuming, takes quite a while, background check process that they conduct on you. You go for an interview, and basically they're assessing the risk. They're assessing you as a person. They're trying to figure out what's your history, what kind of threat might you be, how likely are you to follow our rules? Can we trust you? Is this the kind of thing where we have to inspect you every time, or can we let you through with whatever purchases you made just because we think based on our analysis of you that you're going to follow the rules and you are a very low risk to our countries? So yeah, if you behave following this program, you can keep skipping the line. If you meet the requirements, if you are following the rules, if you're not caught, and you can continue with your Nexus card, and you can keep on going to the short line, skipping the line, as well as other things like that. If you mess up, well, the penalties can be severe. Now, obviously different from security real life, I'm pretty sure they can probably arrest you, but at the very least, they do take away your Nexus card. You lose your privileges because your low risk, the reason they granted this to you, has changed and you are now a high risk at breaking the rules. So they take away your card. So let me introduce you to Kevin's Nexus. This is how I take this concept and apply it to security, how I apply it to application development. So it's the exact same concept as a Nexus card. Everyone gets a grade. Everyone gets a trust rating. You could be an application as a logical object. It could be every single team, every developer, anyone that contributes to an application's release and build. And then based on these trust ratings, we figure out how to insert security. We figure out where we can allow for more access based on trust, or if you screw up otherwise. If there's a high trust rating, we automate the actual approvals of an application. By going through this process and by establishing that an application team is very high functioning, they're ready for a more elite mode, they want to push left as early as possible and use all these tools and services available to them. And the app is a high quality. The app is high code coverage, low number of bugs, no automated vulnerabilities discovered, their third-party packages are all updated, all these different things that apply to it. That means you can sail right through the review process and everything's automated. And if you don't have this high rating, or if you have something occurs all of a sudden, I don't know, say this is all very theoretical at this point, but say you have a dozen high severity vulnerabilities in your NPM packages. Well, then we introduce manual oversight. So if that happens, and if your trust rating's low, then you go through the manual review process. We do more specific code reviews. We run more specific penetration testing, things like that. The worst case here is this is where we are right now. The absolute worst case, if every single application, every developer, every team, everyone that contributes to an application has the lowest trust rating possible and everything has manual oversight. That's what we do right now. That's our present state. So the worst case is no slower or no worse than we already are, which is why I love this approach. And the best case is our happy path. We make as much as possible when those trust ratings are high, we make things streamlined, fast, efficient, automated, and taking the human factor out of it in the sense that the human factor is the intervention required in this case. So to show you very quickly, this is roughly what this process will look like. Now I'll show you here really quickly. So how this kind of works, you start with a new release of an application. You check the trust right here. If that passes, if you are a high trust application, we run the baseline scans. If you fail, we run the baseline scans. And these baseline scans could be, again, check of third-party dependencies, doing a scan looking for plain text secrets in your code. That's a very common one, by the way. One of the most common ones we've ever found. Doing a static code analysis tool like SonarQube, things like that. Doing all the basic checks that kind of establish a baseline of application quality. Based off the pass or, so it doesn't matter if you pass or fail this initial check of your trust level when you do that. But once you get to that point, you check the baseline scan results. If you pass that, then we skip the manual review. And if that happens, you can sail right on through. You pass the failure threshold, meaning you don't have any show-stopping issues. You don't have a ton of vulnerabilities, etc., and you are all done your application release. If you start your release, say you're a low trust rate application, you do your baseline scans, and then say you fail those. Say you have a bunch of code issues, say you have a bunch of security vulnerabilities detected in Sonar Cubes, say you have some high severity NPM package vulnerabilities, then we do a manual review. The security engineer steps in and they do a full-on review of the application the same way we do right now. And after that point, assuming they pass, the application is released. If they fail that, then we reject the release. So all this really does is allow for the ability to move from this, where we have our current manual path, where this can take hours for some small releases, but this can take days. Some applications are massive. An engineer on my team right now is reviewing an application release where there are 2,000 changed files. Many tens of thousands of lines of code have changed. That takes a long time to review and understand the application. It also has, I think, almost 100 NuGet packages as well. This is a very large, very complex application. So the entire world we have right now is this. It is a manual path. It can take days to do a review on larger applications, hours if it's a smaller hotfix. But by implementing this trust system, you can potentially make this take a whole release take minutes. The baseline scans are the really fast part. The manual components are the time-consuming part. So being able to move from hours or days for every single release to minutes is a massive win as far as I'm concerned. So where am I taking this next? What are the next steps here? So for me, I want to build automation for everything I can initially. And at first, this is optional. It's very difficult, as mentioned before, to get people to change, get processes to change, get organizations to change. Change is hard. And having to switch from something we know, our comfort zone, our legacy strategies, is hard because it's a very natural thing to keep on how we've been keeping on for a very long time in this industry. So the key part of this is that this is not just everything all at once, not boiling the ocean, not cutting over all at once. It's slowly building a baseline level of automation for everything you can, everything you possibly can. And then most importantly, it's to get data, it's to gather data, and then you build metrics, you monitor it so you can actually start to build these trust models, because you don't know your quality of your applications until you actually assess the quality of applications. You look at what the code quality is, you look at what the security state of the application is, and that could apply everything from the version of .NET that you're running. I mean, I've seen applications of .NET 3 still. So it's everything from that, not just the quality application, but the maturity of it as well, and the maturity of the team working on it. So you have to gather this data, and this is a lot of data across all elements of the application, everything from the code itself to the third-party dependencies and the security components of the application, authentication components, and it also applies to the operations of an application. Is this application constantly throwing 500 errors in prod? Is this the kind of thing that would happen on a high quality, high maturity application? Probably not, but you don't know until you gather the data to create these trust models. And one of the most important things when I was looking at my slides earlier, I kind of laughed at this one because I left it for a very small bullet point, but get executive buy-in. It's this kind of strategy, this kind of initiative to implement this level of automation and change is a massive undertaking, and it's a hard sell. And again, it's a hard sell because of the historical reasons for the problem and the predicament that we're in right now, which is these large traffic jams of work, of applications, of releases, of under-resourced, stressed out security engineers trying to keep up with everything. And again, one thing at a time. It's so important when implementing any kind of automation to start with a single PowerShell command, start with a single 5-line Python script, do as little as possible at a time. Try and save yourself 30 seconds off a task. Don't jump for the big fish right away. Don't try and simplify the many complex tasks of an IT job immediately. It's important to start small and go little by little, and eventually The 10 seconds you save yourself every hour adds up. It all adds up very quickly, and it will be worth it. It's a slow burn though. You can't do everything at once. And most importantly, every type of automation initiative, everything we do has to be collaborative. We have to work with the developers, work with the engineers, work with the SREs, work with the executives, the business side, the managers. Everyone has to be involved with this because this affects everyone. And everything you do, again, going back to my original example, when I first wrote a script to do a server reboot, well, that affected the teams using the servers. It affected the operations engineers. It affects everyone. And it's important to never forget about the human factor of the work that you're doing. So I think that's it for now. I have been talking for quite a long time now, and I'm going to look at the chat for any questions. If you have any questions, please put it in the chat. All right, let me, oh my goodness, okay. Patrick, any tips to manage open source software vulnerabilities, CVE? Yes, this is a great question because as most of you are probably aware, an application, a modern web application, I created a Hello World app in Angular at one point, and I think out of the box it had 18,000 npm packages. Probably not the most efficient one, but I mean, you can download an npm package that puts a tab in your code. You can do anything with npm packages these days, which is part of the issue, because there are so many thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands third-party packages that can be used at will in any application. It's so easy to add a package no matter what the framework is you're using. This is a massive issue in security, in web app cloud security, and there's no easy solution to this. I know you didn't want to hear that. There is no easy solution. We use a tool called WhiteSource, which is now actually they recently they rebranded. They're called Mend now, MEND, Mend.io. That is a enterprise level tool. However, Snake, I never know how to pronounce that, .io is what we used before that. And I use that on a regular basis as well. Now, what I would recommend in this kind of thing, if your organization is able to purchase a piece of software like WhiteSource, now called Mend, it gives you a large amount of visibility into the third-party dependency usage across all your applications, because again, there are thousands. Now, I will say from experience, false positives in package dependencies are very rare. It's very rare to have a false positive. So I would not ever assume actually there's a false positive, because CVEs are managed very well, and it's very rare that there's any kind of issue or false positive. And these tools basically index CVEs and they alert you based off the inventories that they take. So I would not assume there's false positives, and I would strongly recommend, if you are a commercial thing, you have a startup of 20, so a tool like WhiteSource would actually be really cheap for you guys. I recommend looking into something like that. Looking at using Snake.io, I believe they have a REST API you can use, and again, I recommend that. Say you have the ability to get an inventory of packages in your project. Take that list, fire it at the REST API, get a report of the vulnerabilities that exist. And again, tackle one at a time. When we first got WhiteSource, I think our high severity vulnerability count was over 5,000. So yes, it's the scale is huge. And again, it's because of the scale of these packages. So for example, we started to treat things that were only a CVSS 9.0 score or above. Now, over time, over years, we've worked our way down to, we treat everything 7.0 and above, slowly working our way down that scale. It's the only way you can realistically do these and get things done in like bite-sized chunks, because again, like you said, it's massive. Andre, hey, Andre. Yes. Oh, that's such a good question. Depends who you ask. If you ask me or a modern security team or modern security engineer, yes, these should be replaced by more agile and DevOps. If you ask Deloitte, no, they won't be replaced. So that's a very challenging issue, because again, it goes back to what I said. Usually these third-party compliance requirements. They insist on a third-party penetration test, which might mean they fire HP Fortify scans at your application for a week. Not going to get much useful out of that, if anything at all, and it can be very disruptive to your application. So that is an issue. I agree with you, it's an issue. It's a huge pain. And I think that that will be replaced and modernized eventually. I do not see that happening for a while, again, because of these very, very commonly used large firms, which, again, they're in the legacy world. They have legacy strategies and legacy tools, and it's very difficult to change. And understanding that these legacy strategies and tools just have not kept up with how rapidly these applications and cloud systems have modernized. And the other question was, yeah, so that's an awesome question again. Yeah, so the idea behind the Nexus system was, as far as this goes, to ensure that that trust level is maintained, or to reassess that trust level, is that when the security processes, tools, and again, the components of this Nexus system are injected into an application, every time a build runs, security scans, security items run, that all can affect this theoretical trust rating. So for example, say one of the pieces of items that the reason the trust rating fell was because of large number of third-party package vulnerabilities. Well, every time the build runs, it checks those the state of those vulnerabilities again. And if that is going down and trending down, that can affect the trust rating, as well as when an actual release happens and a security engineer, because you're in the manual mode still, security engineer assesses the application and sees, oh, this is much better. They fixed all these issues quite promptly, etc. All these different things that can go into it can improve this trust rating. That's how it would be able to go up. And as well, it goes the other way as well. If there is, again, as you mentioned, there's a prod security instance, say an application is, heaven forbid, hacked or compromised, well, that can really affect the trust rating depending on how you do it. Hope that answered your question, Andre. Thank you for those. Emmanuel, how do you deal with pen test requirements in cloud environments? Oh, yeah, this is an interesting question. So I will speak for Azure. I worked in AWS quite a few years ago at my last job a little bit, but 98% of my cloud experience and expertise is Azure. Microsoft is very good at their terms of use when it comes to pen testing and security testing. So basically, you can do it anytime you want, anywhere you want, any Azure resource, you have a blank slate. You can pen test and do any kind of security testing you want against any Azure resource. In general, there's a few caveats there. What the one key caveat they have is if you find a security flaw in an Azure Fabric service, so say you're testing your app that's hosted on an app service, but you actually find some kind of administrative flaw in the PaaS app service component itself, not your application, then you actually are obligated to report that to Microsoft. They have a specific contacting for this. But you are not actually stopped, or you are allowed to test against anything in Azure. Again, the only caveat is if you find something in a specific category, you have to tell them. But you are not stopped from doing anything. I believe AWS is very similar. Now, going back a few years, I'm trying to remember when they changed this, but even going back a few years, both cloud providers, or I should say there's three of them, there's Google Cloud too, but hey, Azure and AWS are the big players. They had a much more restrictive policy as recent as a few years ago, in that, for example, in Azure, you actually had to fill out a form and get approval from Microsoft before performing any kind of pen testing against your own applications. They got rid of that policy, and it's wide open now. So one of the ways I actually keep up on things myself is I actually have an Azure hosted lab at home that I mess around on and do security stuff on. I attack that thing all the time. So I encourage everyone to do the same. Use, I believe Amazon AWS is free if you, for some services, like you spin up a T2 micro virtual machine for free. Azure has a few similar free services, as well as if you first sign up, you get $200 of credit. Anyways, there's various ways to get free access, as well as your own organization might have some kind of benefit to get some free access for personal use. And I encourage people to try this. If you're interested in something, just try it out. Again, the pen test requirements are wide open now. So I hope that answers your question, Emmanuel. Thank you. Anyone else have any other questions? Or are you all tired of hearing from me?
It was great presentation, Kevin. I think we are at this point sort of out of time, but people can actually contact you, right? You
Yes.
put a Twitter
Yes.
link. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I will put, so my email's in the chat, and feel free to DM me on Twitter and get in touch, anything that you would like, and I'm happy to talk more about all this stuff and answer questions at any time. As you can tell, I like this stuff, so don't hesitate to reach out to me.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Perfect. So I think we're going to close at this point. So many thanks, William, Tom, and Kevin. They were really fascinating presentations, and definitely a lot of questions, more than usual. So excellent. They were that it really indicates that they were really good, interesting topics. Also, thank you, Shai and Willie, for helping with coordinating of this event. And thank you very much, everybody who participated tonight. And I know there is a sun, though there was sun outside today. You actually stuck with us. So as always, if there is any topic that you would be interested in presenting that is related to DevOps, please do not hesitate to reach out to Willie, Shai, Ilse, or myself, and we'll schedule something in the nearest future. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a great evening.
Thank you, Andre. Thank you, Willie. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Bye-bye.